the future. My name's Calabucas, and once again we're coming at you live from deep in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. We're talking innovation startups, the future, and for now, not necessarily those, and not necessarily in that order. If you're listening on YouTube, smack that subscribe button and hit that bell. Actually watching on YouTube. And you'll get notified when a new show comes online. If you're listening on your favorite podcast service, please subscribe and drop us a note, or me a note, on Apple Podcasts about the show, whether you like it or not. What the hell was I going to talk about today? Oh yeah, that's right. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about the differences between Americans and Germans. And he was talking about how when the Germans see a law that they feel is unjust, then they comply with the law, and then they go to their politicians and they work to change the law so that they no longer have to comply with it. And the Americans have the absolute opposite story. They see an unjust law and they do not comply with the law. And then they work to change the law. Or maybe they don't, because they don't comply with the law anymore, and therefore, why would we need to change the law if no one is complying with it anyway? Maybe that's the attitude for that lawmakers have now, is that, you know, we can start these laws, we can bring these laws in, and plenty of laws are being brought in, but we understand that Americans aren't really going to comply, and I think Greeks are like that too. They're not really going to comply, so does it really matter that we're bringing these laws out? I mean, they'll comply with some laws, obviously, you know, like something like a traffic light. Obviously, we're going to comply with traffic lights because there'd be chaos if there wasn't. So we have to think to ourselves, what is the market that we're going after? Are we going after the American market, or are we going after the international market? Because there's a huge cultural difference between the American market and the rest of the world, right? Because look at something like Uber, for example. So Uber is a great example of permissionless innovation, right? And permissionless innovation is very similar to what I was talking about with the complying and the do not complying, right? So when Uber first started, instead of actually going through the motions of trying to get approved to be in all these cities, they just launched. And in the process of just launching, sure, there was a lot of pushback against Uber because of taxi rules and all these other things, but they were launched, they were in the market, people were using them, people were loving them, and then they had to walk backwards. And in some markets they got kicked out, and in some markets they got approved, but eventually they grew to where they are today, right? Permissionless innovation. Just go ahead and do it, even especially if the law is a little fuzzy. Go ahead and do it, and then they might come back to you. So maybe they'll shut you down, maybe they won't, but at least get it out there and get people using it, so you can get an idea as to whether or not there's a demand for this service, right? And it's something very similar that happened in the cable industry, and I talked about this before, is that long time ago I used to work in the cable industry, and the story of the cable industry is almost the exact same thing. It's like somebody had an antenna, and they were getting TV signals from far away, and they thought, some of my neighbors want some of this too. So why don't I run a cable from my antenna to their home and charge them to send them the signal? Now, of course, if I'm running an antenna in my home and I'm sending the signal to friends of mine who are next door and I'm charging them for it, then basically what I'm doing is I'm stealing this signal and I'm charging to sell it to somebody else. Now that doesn't sound legal, does it? But that's how cable companies were born. Cable companies were born out of one enterprising person putting up an antenna and selling it to their neighbors, and then expanding that network all the way through. And now we have Xfinity. Xfinity was born from theft. They stole signal and they gave it to their customers. That's where that entire industry came from. So you see, this is something like Uber is not the only industry that use permissionless innovation to push forward. So that's what I'm saying, is that we need to think more like that. Innovators, startup founders, people who want to get things out there in the world, they have to stop being so timid and going, should we do this? Should we do this? No, we shouldn't just, should we do this? We have to do it. We put it out there and we see what happens. And if we get pushback, that's fine. That's a feature, not a bug. We know we're going to get pushback. We know that there's many institutions out there that don't like this idea. We know that we're going to disrupt all sorts of things that are out there. And that's what I was talking about earlier about the post-scarcity society. The post-scarcity society is going to disrupt so much of our current culture, of our current society. But I got to tell you that if we had post-scarcity technology come in here and overturn us into a completely new society because we're able to have unlimited amounts of food and unlimited amounts of fuel and unlimited amounts of sustainability. If we could usher in a post-scarcity society and upturn everything for the greater good, wouldn't we want to do that? No, we won't, because we're too afraid of that. That's what I'm saying, is that the startup founders, the innovators, the vanguards, people like us, we need to continue pushing forward and stop listening to the should-we's and just do it. That's it for me for today. See you next time, and until then, don't forget to think future.